So, I actually am getting really interested in what's going on with how Sam Presti is doing his job. Because doing his job now is, I think, the reason that he gets paid in the first place, right? Because you are in a salary cap situation in which, you got to figure out how to get under the tax in such a way that you don't owe anybody in the repeater tax. Because going into the tax last year, you can make an argument for that, even as you were a first-round exit against the Utah Jazz. But in the way that he seems to be wanting to put this together, where many people, myself included, think that you need shooters, getting shooters out of the bargain basement and also trusting the process for them to be developed into the kind of guys that can help is the issue. And this is one of the things that I wanted to ask my man Eric at the Oklahoma. Eric, how you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you?
Is Juventus still your squad?
I don't think I'd have a squad necessarily. Like I just like good ball, man. But yeah, I don't really have a squad.
Okay, I was just checking. To the business then. Short of cutting the salary to get under the luxury tax, what is Sam Presti's strategy for surrounding Paul George and Russell Westbrook on the court?
Well, first, I don't think they're going to get under the luxury tax.
Okay.
They can get closer to it, but getting under it, I mean, I don't know if you can be a competitive team against the teams that they're going up against, and with the guys that they have on the roster taking up as much salary as they do, and get under the tax. I mean, Russell Westbrook and Paul George combined are going to be making $70 million, so it's kind of tough when you're facing that. As far as Presti's strategy, I mean, he continues to go back to the words internal improvement, and that's a subtle way of saying that Russell Westbrook and some of the guys that they have on the team, Jeremy Grant, Terrence Ferguson, Steven Adams, they just got to be better. And they're in a tough situation from a standpoint of free agency, which I'm sure we'll talk about, in that they can't spend a ton of money to go get guys. They've got minimum contracts to deal with. They presumably aren't going to use their taxpayer mid-level, which would be about $5.7 million, to overpay a guy that they could get. I think they got solid value by signing these guys that they did, or agreeing to sign these guys that they did to minimums. So they're in a tough position. I think the best way for this team to get better is going to be through trades. And that's typically the way that the Thunder gets better, because they just don't have a great track record of going and getting free agent guys.
Well, it kind of leads into my next question, which was, will we see Steven Adams, Andre Roberson, or Dennis Schroeder traded before free agency agreements become official on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. They've got a trade exception that expires in July 25th, where basically they can take salary in and it not count against the salary cap necessarily. It's basically like having cap space, and that was created through the Carmelo Anthony deal. So they've got until the end of the month to use that until it expires. So I don't think that there's necessarily a timeline on when they're going to get a deal done or when they have to get a deal done. They've gotten deals done, into the beginning of August in the past when it comes to making trades. So, but it just seems logical that they're going to make some kind of move, whether it's something smaller to lower their bill now, because they're bringing on salary with these guys that they're going to be signing in free agency. That would put their payroll number of north of $150 million if you're just assuming that those guys are going to be on minimum contracts. And then they still haven't even signed their first-round pick, Darius Bazley, which will happen at the end of the week probably, or in the next week or so. I think those guys can sign on the 6th. And then they haven't accounted for Raymond Felton, who's a guy they like, and they'd like to have back, and he would sign a minimum to come back. So I don't know if there's an answer to whether or not they're going to trade any of those guys now, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened later from a standpoint of trying to get closer to the luxury tax by maybe trading a Robertson in the last year of his contract into a team that has cap space in order for the Thunder to not take anything back, maybe take back second-rounders or something like that to where they don't take on salary.
This also leads to the question, and I think it's obvious, but I want to put it to you. Why are we even worried about staying under the luxury tax if, one, you'll go into it, and two, you're willing to pay the repeater? Because, I mean, now we're talking about what, $200 million in salary for this team for 1 year? I get that the Thunder are an NBA franchise, but there's printing money and then there's doing this.
Well, I mean, that would be like, I guess it would be close to $200 million in salary plus tax. That's important to add. It's not just salary. I think around the salary number is like 150.
Right.
And another thing that's important to add is they have until the end of next year to get to a certain number, and that's how much it'll cost them in taxes. For instance, last year at this time, they were on the books to pay like $140 million in luxury tax because they had Carmelo Anthony. But then they made moves, and at the end of the season, they ended up paying somewhere closer to 60. So while that's still a massive number, like one of the biggest numbers in the league, they cut it significantly. But you raise an interesting question, and I'm going to vary the question a little bit differently in that why is the Thunder worried about paying the tax now when they have guys like Russell Westbrook and Paul George that are on contract for 2 years together, and until Paul George can become a free agent in 21? That's the real question to me: is why are you pinching pennies during the time where basically everyone else is pushing their chips into the table? I have no knowledge of what their thought is in regard to that, but what it looks like on the surface is you put a lot of trust in these guys that you've already invested a lot of money into. You want them to improve, and if they don't improve, you're basically stacking it to where when Paul George inevitably leaves in 21, you're going to be able to reboot with guys like Jeremy Grant, Bazley, Ferguson, and whatever you were able to parlay from a Steven Adams trade. That looks defeatist, but it's also how the Thunder operates from the standpoint that they believe in continuity. I mean, who am I to say whether that's the right thing or wrong thing to do? I just think that you should be as all-in as possible during this time frame. And it's not to say that they aren't going to be, because they still have moves that they can make. And I think that this roster isn't finished. I think there's a lot of time before the beginning of the season. And I think they're going to make some moves that are going to make the team stronger between now and the beginning of the season.
No, man, that was really good. That was actually really strong. Last question I had for you was, which Summer League player on this roster are you excited to see outside of perhaps? Now I'm blanking. Is Bazley even on the roster?
No, and
yeah,
I'm going to write about this later in the week. The Bazley situation is one of those where he's a Rich Paul client, and from my understanding is Rich Paul is pretty protective of his guys. He had a guy play last year in Summer League, Miles Bridges, for the Charlotte Hornets. But this year he's got a few clients that probably aren't going to play. Darius Garland is a young guard out of Vanderbilt who had some injury history in Vanderbilt, didn't play most of the season. Taylor Horton-Tucker, he's a guy who's with the Lakers who picked up an injury and probably isn't going to play. And then you got Bazley, who seems to be healthy, and from all accounts is healthy, but it's a situation where Rich Paul and Clutch, they tend to kind of strong arm or try to push negotiations to their very limit when it comes to some of these rookie guys, even though they're slotted in terms of the money they can make, first rounders. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bazley didn't play at all. And that's not a thing that like people should be angry about or up in arms about, but they should expect it. He's still going to be in camp, and he's still going to be signed before camp. It's just one of those things where that's how Clutch operates. Now, to answer your question, the guy I'd probably be excited to see is like Hamidou Diallo. Slam dunk contest champion, a guy who showed some real potential with the Thunder in the beginning of last season. Looked like a guy who could push Terrence Ferguson for playing time, but he's got defensive work to do. I think teams figured out he doesn't have a jump shot yet, but he's got all the athleticism in the world. He's aggressive. He can handle the ball a little bit. He's a great offensive rebounder, and I think for them to kind of push him into some uncomfortable situations the way they did with Ferguson last year, kind of get him to work on his game. And, he doesn't have to have a great-looking summer league, but to have him have more responsibility and to do some more things that he didn't do last season, I think that'll be big for him, and particularly since he's coming off of an injury. I think he had some elbow issues that ended his season last year. So Hamidou Diallo will be a guy for me to watch for sure.
That is Eric Horn, the Thunder basketball beat writer for the Oklahoman. Eric, hey, man, this is really good. I sincerely appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, no problem. I know I'm long-winded, but hey, man, thanks.
No, like I said, it's really good. Hope to talk to you soon.
All right.
Yeah, that was money. Like Eric Horn, follow him on Twitter at Eric Horn OK. Man, I've known Eric for a very long time, and the work that he has been able to do on that beat is frankly outstanding. Just full stop outstanding. I really love that dude and his work.